The Alaska summit in the mirror of Russian propaganda. Russia is back, Europe has lost. The broadcast of the Big Game program, August 18, 2025, is a clear example of how state television in Russia turns a diplomatic event into a political myth. Russian viewers are offered a picture of Putin's great victory and, at the same time, Europe's defeat. 1. A historic meeting of equal powers. From the first minutes, the hosts set the audience up to perceive the summit as fateful and historical. The contrast is extremely crude. Trump allegedly humiliates vassals and satellites, but a solemn atmosphere is created for Putin. The message is obvious. Russia has returned to the club of great powers, and all talk of isolation is a thing of the past. This technique serves internal mobilization. Russians must feel national pride, but it is also addressed externally. Europe is made to understand that it is not considered an equal partner. 2. From isolation of Russia to isolation of Europe. One of the key theses of the broadcast: isolation of Russia is over. Isolation of Europe has begun. This is a reversal of the facts. In reality, it is Moscow that remains the target of sanctions and international criticism. But for the Russian audience, the image is created that it is now Europe that has been pushed out of the decision-making process. An important point: such a statement prepares the ground for pressure on the Europeans. They are conveying the idea, you were not invited to the summit. Your opinion means nothing. 3. Substitution of concepts. Peace versus truce. Special attention is paid to Trump's statement that we need not just a ceasefire, but a final peace. In Russian broadcasts, this is immediately interpreted as acceptance of the Russian paradigm. A subtle substitution occurs here. In the Russian interpretation, final peace means the consolidation of military gains and Ukraine's renunciation of territories. In fact, the audience is being led to believe that the U.S. has agreed to the Kremlin's ultimatum. 4. Softening the U.S. position on sanctions. The hosts emphasize that before the meeting, Trump threatened the most severe sanctions, but after the summit, he abandoned them. This is presented as America's concession and Moscow's victory. The real logic of American policy is much more complex, but propaganda simplifies it to the narrative of the West has wavered. 5. Europe as a pathetic crowd. European leaders are portrayed as caricatures. Euro-bastards are flying to Washington in droves to beg Trump. Derogatory language is used, human wave attack, with one rifle for 3, which reinforces the image of Europe's weakness and panic. Unlike the U.S., which is recognized as an equal partner, Europe plays the role of an extra in this scheme. For the Russian audience, this is a signal. The West is divided, and only Moscow and Washington decide the future. 6. Ukraine as a non-subject. The hosts repeat after Trump: Russia is a major power, Ukraine is not. This thesis is built into the central narrative. The fate of the war is being decided without Kyiv. Ukraine is shown not as the injured party, but as a problematic negotiator, interfering with the grand deal. 7. Putin's symbolic victory. Most of the broadcast is devoted to symbolism. Red carpets, gala receptions, fear of Western elites. All this creates a picture of Putin's personal victory, both on the diplomatic front and in international status. This is probably the key point that has identified the real subjects in the context of solving key, probably global issues, and the fact that there was a real panic on the European side, which is happening now, where they have hastily gathered in a huge camp to go and persuade Trump, suggests that, firstly, some decisions have really been made that have a long-term strategic nature, and they do not concern Europe and their opinion, Firstly, and secondly, that the window of strategic dialogue is open, and this interaction will continue. And it will continue not only in the political, but also in the economic, which for Ukraine as a whole and for the continuation of this war, which is the main factor for survival for Europe, is a very bad signal. Well, indeed, the Alaska result has become a monstrously negative signal and just a disaster for both the American War Party and the European War Party. Here is a very indicative reaction to the results of the summit. The publication of Keith Kellogg's daughter. Let me remind you that Keith Kellogg is Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, which means that he also adheres to a pro-Ukrainian position to a greater extent, perhaps under the influence of his daughter. In any case, she also adheres to a pro-Ukrainian position. Let's listen to what she published after the summit in Alaska. American military personnel in uniform should not have been forced to roll out the red carpet for our enemy. Period. This is a terrible decision, and those responsible must answer with a knife in the back. Why is this important for Europe? 1. This is not only domestic propaganda. Russian TV deliberately addresses its messages abroad to undermine European cohesion and instill the idea that the West is getting tired. 2. This is preparation for pressure. The Kremlin is constructing a narrative that the US and Russia have already decided everything, and Europe can only accept it. If this myth is taken seriously, the EU's negotiating position may be weakened. The broadcast of The Great Game shows that propaganda is turning the summit into an instrument of psychological warfare. Europe is presented as a weak and fragmented union, the US as Moscow's partner, and Ukraine as a non-entity. For the European reader, it is important to see the goal behind this rhetoric, not to inform, but to convince that resistance is futile.